And I'm Tai Preuninger. I'm an instructional technology coach for Agnew, Rutherford, and Hamby. And helping us learn today is going to be Jena and Emilee.
Hi guys, I'm Jena Montgomery, Instructional Technology Coach for Northside Pride, Bainley McDonald Middle School, and North Mesquite High School.
Yeah, I'm Emilee Simmons. I'm on the west side, so I have West Mesquite and Fraser.
We got a couple more people from our department. Thank you guys for joining us, and some familiar faces that are with us too. So again, thank you. We are wanting to talk about PBL. I think we're all really passionate about that, and we see how much potential it has to change what we're doing in the classroom. But that could look a little bit different during distance learning. So what we want to provide to you are some tips to help make that a reality for what you can do between now and the end of May, right? This month. That's kind of insane to say. And and it's not just good for distance learning. So the things we cover today are things that you definitely can carry over into whatever setting we're faced with in the fall. So what's good for distance learning is going to be good for, face-to-face learning. So we really want to give you some tips. So this session is kind of based on a blog post that John Spencer put out in the past couple weeks. And if you were to click on in this slide, not that one, but the picture in this first slide, it links to the blog post where he gives 7 distinct tips for PBL. And so we're basing the session off of that. And then we've added some info to help make that a little bit more personal to what we're doing here in Mesquite. So what we thought that we'd do first is a quick little design sprint just to get us moving and to see if it's possible, because we are about taking some creative risks, because PBL is definitely about that. So here's what we would like you to do. Grab a piece of paper. Okay, see if you have a piece of paper around you. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just maybe something that you can fold. Yes, something that you can fold. So this is going to require you to turn your cameras on, if you don't mind. So please turn your cameras on. Grab that sheet of paper. And what we're going to attempt to do is we are in blocks right now, right? We're in a rectangle and a square. You can see all of us right now. We're going to take this paper and we're going to hold it up, and we're going to create a circle out of our papers. Okay, so I want to see if we can do that. So you can turn your mic on if you think that we need to talk and communicate this out. But this is where it's going to get challenging. So look at your screen. Who's on the outside of mine? You might not be on the outside on your screen. So that's going to be challenging. You're going to have to look at my screen. And so I'm thinking Amanda, Anna, Aubrey, Camille, you're going to have to maybe fold yours to get that edge, right? So like here I am. In order for me to get it to work, I'm going to have to make kind of like a rounded edge in my corner for us to get our circle to work. Does that make sense? So I want you to try to fold your paper. Look at our screen. So Marie, James, Jenna, Mary, Matthew, you're pretty much going to be full on the screen, right? Your paper's going to fill the screen?
Jessica too.
Jessica too? All right, let's see if we can. Tamara, where's your sheet of paper? You need a sheet of paper. And we're making a circle. Amanda, I like your corner. Good stuff. Emilee got the side. Maria, fold yours in half. Nikisha, you're on the switch. It's mirror view. So you're going to have to switch. Other side. Tilt it the other way. Bring it over the other way.
There you go, Candace. Or Constant. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go, Lisa. Nikisha, other way. Your other right, or your right.
Go the opposite of what you're doing, Nikisha.
You're muted. It's okay.
I thought I had it the first time. This way.
I know. It's tough, right? All right, good stuff. There is our attempt to make a circle. So y'all can put that down. So I know, look, that's cheesy. But the idea of guessing, checking, giving feedback, communicating, working together, all of these things are important parts of PBL. And so we're going to try to go through some of those things. And feedback is hopefully a theme that you're going to see throughout what we talk about this morning. And anyway, thank you guys for playing that game that might be a trash in terms of trash and treasure, but we'll say we gave it a good try. All right, Emilee, you're up.
Okay, cool. So when we found this article, we were reading and researching the background of it. One of the things that we really loved was the fact it doesn't have to be anything big or crazy, or like when I think of PBL, I think of like life-changing and world-changing projects. And realistically, when it's in our classroom, especially with distance learning, that's not really what it's going to be. So with all the uncertainty and all the things, like with all the internet and number of kids in the class or in the household, or maybe their parents are working, whatever, all the uncertainties, we want to give them a challenge, but we don't want to make it mandatory. So we want to make PBL optional. So if they choose the assignment, though, we need to remember that it's not because they don't want to do it. It may be that it's not the right time for them now, or maybe it's something they're not passionate about. So what I would do as a teacher, they decide not to do it. Let's have that one-on-one conversation and really get down to the root of why. Is it the time constraints? Is it internet? What is it? Is it that you don't have the supplies that you need? Okay, why is it? And then have that conversation. But really, PBL, it's not about the physical distance, but about that relational distance and building that relationships with your students. So if they choose the traditional assignment, have that available for them. But remember, our whole goal of PBL is to stretch that student problem solving. Okay, we want to have that productive struggle. So don't just allow them, have that conversation with them. Sorry, I lost my tab, Tai.
Oh, I've done that before.
There we go. Sorry. And then our second tip, which I love, is the vintage innovation. So taking that PBL away from the screen, and how are we going to use the old ideas that our kids are maybe familiar with in the classroom, and then transform them into the present. So I love sketchnoting. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do, is to like doodle notes. And so one of the examples we found was just adding that sketching that we're already doing, those doodle notes, and then adding that video. And so now we have that active sketchnoting. Or we're doing Socratic seminars in our high school. So how do we add that voice recording, that new innovation to it? And now all of a sudden we have a debate podcast. Okay. So, excuse me. And then one of my favorites that I've seen teachers do over the last few weeks is they're just asking their students to find supplies, whether it be duct tape or cardboard or whatever, and then give them a topic and asking them to create something new. So we want to hear from y'all. I know that was really quick and fast, but we do want to hear from you. How do we help students learn from home?
Feel free to unmute your mics and talk. You don't have to type it in.
And Emilee, while they're unmuting and thinking about that, one thing that we should probably preface is, some of us, we might not be as familiar with PBL, with project-based learning. So, what's the difference between a project and project-based learning? So there is a huge difference, right? So usually whenever we're assigning projects, we have, as teachers, predetermined what that outcome will be. And we're setting kind of the expectations and telling them what they have to make, what they have to create, what they do with that work. Whereas project-based learning, there's a process and a cycle that you go through to where we do give students choice and some ownership in what they create, but we scaffold, along the way, maybe some of those questioning pieces, or we help create some structure to that, which is what's coming. So in terms of PBL, some people may have heard about it as maybe it's problem-based learning, or maybe it's it could look very, very different. But the biggest difference is that one is teacher-centered and the other is really more student-centered. So we're really talking more about those student side of things. So to her questions.
If y'all want to share, y'all can unmute yourself and just talk about how do we help our students learn from home, and then what should it look like right now with distance learning.
If you want to talk, you can, grab your closest household item, grab a cat, hold it up, you can be first to talk.
I mean, I think my team and I have been sort of working on PBL before all of this went on. So I know just a few things because we're trying to keep in mind the constraints they have at home. But we did a thing over ecological succession, which is like, you end up with just rock or dirt and stuff comes to life. So we asked them like, hey, go out and find that and take a picture. And we have a map thing coming up. So I've kind of given them a heads up of, hey, if you have some Play-Doh or you can get some Play-Doh, this will be an option that you can do. And they're going to figure out how to make their own map. And then I know we talked about getting away from screens, but kind of changing the screen. If they have Minecraft, I'm going to give them an option to create one of those maps in that format too.
I like that.
Yeah. James, so how you are like giving options, right? Like some of our kids, one of my teachers has been working on doing some PBL and some sorts, and she gave the kids the option to either create a slingshot or a chain reaction. And like they had a couple different options. And she said that she was anticipating that a lot of these slingshots would just be, a random thing that they could find. But these kids put a lot of time and thought into it, and that they had these passions come out that she was not anticipating at all. So when we give these kids options and opportunities, they will surprise us for sure, even in distance learning, which is awesome.
We did ecology before too, and one really cool project was the argument between restoring land back to an environment today in a marshland, and have like a debate that way. And the students
Kimberly, I really
problem that around the Lake Louisville area was experiencing.
Oh, well, you were just breaking
ahead,
up a little bit. So we really wanted to hear your thoughts. So we heard Marsh and then like Louisville and that. So maybe, but no, you can try to let us know that, or tell us in the chat too, like give us some of those details.
Yeah. Am I coming through okay now? Okay. So they picked a debate side whether to restore a marshland back to its original state before it was agriculturally taken over, and before whenever it was like a natural prairie land, or is it more sustainable today to do something that would survive in the current conditions post-human environment. And they got very passionate about their sides, and it was a real world problem, and it tied into invasive species and all the things we cover in biology. And it was just really exciting to see them take on these concepts addressing something near the Lake Louisville area. So it was very, very cool to see another idea.
I love that. And so many times, like when I'm planning with teachers and we're looking at their teaks, and I'm like, what's the verb in the teak? And it sounds like, I mean, you're going to hit the verb or a deeper verb when they do like find their own research, develop their own opinion, argue that opinion, be able to stand up against it respectfully. Like those are lifelong skills that they're going to have. I love that.
Anyone else?
Now, just say I like the fact that we're having conversations over it and not just typing into the chat. It makes it more personal. So, kudos.
Yes, thank you guys for sharing, for sure. Emilee, you good? Thumbs up?
I'm good.
All right. So the next tip we wanted to talk about is grouping. So one thing that I've been thinking of is that I think because we've been in isolation for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we've been learning remotely, we don't need to assume that everything should be done or will have to be done independently. That's not necessarily the case. So I think what we can do with our work is, always provide the opportunity, especially with these, with PBL. It's not difficult to make that happen, right? To just give them the choice. But sometimes kids just need to hear you say that, hey, it's okay to work with another person. And they might not even be thinking of that like with another student at school. It could be with a sibling, because I've seen it in my kids. Well, my older daughter, and she might be a little bossy with her younger brother too, but where she's, making him participate and do things for her, or, help her with some of the things that she's doing at school. But the one thing that we can't do is we can't require it, right? You guys tell me, and please speak up if you think there could ever be a situation where we require group work during this setting. Maybe not here in May, but maybe in the fall. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Kimberly, I see you shaking your head yes. Can you give me a scenario or what you're thinking?
I think you could do something that they create, maybe a public service announcement or that type of a project base. Obviously ecology-based concepts, I feel like it's easier to do from home in that setting. So where they can increase awareness, something that they would put on TV or something that they would do to benefit. And they could do that from home, or even collaborate using Google Docs, Google Slides. I don't think that that's out of the ordinary. And these students are way more tech savvy than we are. I've come to find out things I thought would be challenging for them aren't. The things that I feel like would be easy are more challenging. So I feel like creating something like on a problem-based or project-based level might even be easier in this environment, because they can all collaborate on their computers. It just depends on whenever you frame your initial question, it's how you frame it determines if it's more, if it's easier for them. But I think it's very easy. You don't have to require it a lot, but you could at least do one thing, because that's going to prep them for college too. They're going to have to do those things.
I think you're right. They have a whole bunch of skills that we haven't tapped into because we've never had the need, or maybe we're at school and we don't want their phones out. We don't want them texting. We don't want them doing all that. Those are behaviors that they're used to. And just because, some of our students were texting and, talking to their friends before the pandemic, they're still doing that. So I think they're just not used to doing that for educational purposes. And so I think they need to, kind of rewire their brains to understand that's okay. And that's a great behavior to get used to. And we have to think about during PBL, it's not, every kid doesn't have to do the same thing. Each member is going to have something of value that they can add to the group, whether that be, one person could be a good question asker, or another person might be good at the creation aspect of things. So in terms of when you're going to give them the opportunity to work with others, be strategic with your grouping. So one thing that I've given you that I've linked on here that I want to show you is this spreadsheet. And this came from Catlin Tucker. She is a teacher who's a rock star at blended learning. And what this is I've taken her idea and given you a spreadsheet that you can use to keep track of students and what they're good at, what their levels of reading and writing are, what their learning styles are, what they're passionate about. And so the way it would work is you would list your students' names here, or you could list your student names underneath these levels, and you can just level your kids and go ahead and group them or know this information about them. So So then you can take like your first period class or maybe your morning class for younger grades. But then you can move over here and you can just have this ready to go. So imagine if kids were walking in, or if you were sharing this on Google Classroom, wherever you're going to share it, you can quickly have these groups created to where, and it's based on what activities you're having them do. So if you're doing, if you're in the feedback stage of your project, then that might be, your groups might be based on contribution level. So you wouldn't want to have all of your talkers in one group or all of your leaders in one group, right? You might want to split that up and even that out. So I really like this tip in that, you know, be careful how you group students, and don't just assume for distance learning that we have to do it based on who they want to pair up with, right? Because I think we want to have a balance of challenging them to work with people that they might not be used to. And whenever they're removed from that traditional classroom setting during distance learning, they might actually be more prone to do that instead of being there, you know, in front of people with all their peers.
Well, and you know, Tai, one of my favorite movies is Wizard of Oz, so I use this a lot. If we were to pull the curtain behind what Tai, Emilee, and I did, that's kind of what we started out. We talked briefly, maybe 20 minutes on a meet, and came up with a skeleton. And then we put all of this together separately, and then we came back together for about 10 minutes to make sure that it was gonna flow correctly. But so when you're thinking about grouping, or when you're thinking about working together, we can work together separately and then just make sure to come back together. I know when I first started teaching, when I thought about group projects or whatever, I thought, oh, they have to be in the group together all the time to be able to work on that together, but they don't. As long as they have as long as we provide like a structure, or they have a structure for themselves.
And one thing I want to point out, this second bullet point actually comes from our technology rubrics of collaboration. So if we're looking at the highest level of collaboration that we would want to see in our classrooms, then as teachers, we should be designing lessons that depend on kids partnering to create those solutions together. So how can we depend on our kids to do a part to come up with solutions, or to come up, maybe solve a problem with maybe a problem-based learning task, or some kind of creation, and then they bring that together, and then those parts make a better whole. So that's really the highest level of collaboration, and how you do that with whatever products or with whatever tools, it doesn't matter. But I did want to point that out. The last thing that I really liked, and this link right here could look like this, takes you back to the blog post that we worked on. And it really talked about a process that made sense for what students should be doing. So again, this is that post where I say that we took 7 different tips, and whenever you scroll down to the 4th one, here's kind of a process that would work for kids. So the very first task, what if you pose a problem to your students? First, have kids create some questions. What questions do they have about this topic? For our younger students, they might need some sentence stems, but we need to teach kids to be able to ask relevant questions, or play off of their curiosity, what they're wondering. Then once you have all their questions collected, you can have them add them to a Google form, or collect them all in a Google Doc, because the whole idea is you want all of those questions to be available to everybody. Then you would have to facilitate maybe some kind of meetup, right? Maybe you are scheduling specific times to meet with those small groups of your students, and you're creating those Google Meets. Or maybe if they're older, you're letting them meet up on their own, but you as the teacher are like, tell them, hey, invite me. I really would like to be a part of that. Just check in on them, make sure that they have everything that they need. This is a great time to give roles to people, right? Teach kids to bring their strengths to the table. And then they are talking about their questions, they're giving feedback, they are figuring out what their next step is going to be, maybe in that, moving into that research phase. So I really like his ideas on what that might look like in a distance learning setting. So good stuff there. So one thing, how do you make sure that students are carrying their weight? And whether it be in school or out of school, what advice can some of you guys give?
I feel like if you use some of the Google Docs and everything, like Kimberly was talking about, then you can see how much one person is writing. So that could be a way where you could check up on kids and just make sure that everybody is contributing. It may not be equal, but at least you could see like who contributed what.
Anyone else? Think about, when you're in class and you have, right, their desks or their tables who are moved together, and we typically know who's going to dominate in a group, right? What do you do for those students who might be, a little disengaged? How do we bring them back?
Well, that's where, that's where the jobs would come in. And then to check on them, hey, what is your job? And what are you contributing within that role?
Yeah, and I think maybe that's where you're differentiating things a little bit, right? If you know that students aren't, that's not really a strength that they have to, to create something, then maybe you're grading them, on something else, on what they can contribute or what they are good at. Just so long as you know that they are doing their job or fulfilling that role.
I like the idea of kind of facilitating meets maybe with each group and sitting in on some of it just to kind of see what's going on. And I've noticed too, a lot of my students that are way more reserved and quiet in class, when they come to my whole class meet and it's just a few of us, or we're talking in private comments on Google Classroom, they are way more willing to like speak up and show their personalities than they would be in a classroom setting. And I think if you had kind of like a discussion board format for one of their projects, you could even say like, once you post something, you have to wait for somebody to reply to it before you can keep talking. That way one person's not dominating the conversation.
I like that. So logistically, if you wanted to meet with students at a time, I've seen this with PLCs, right? Where you have maybe a spreadsheet where you have all of your different grade levels and subject areas and the times that they meet, right? So you're keeping track of those links. So if you're a teacher, what you could do to make that a safe place or a safe way to do that is to have maybe individual nicknamed meets for those groups so that you can begin those, but maybe ahead of time you've talked to them or you've already decided a good time for them to get together and do that. And then you can make sure that they're doing that in a safe way if we're concerned about that, for some groups of our students. I know some of you wouldn't have to worry about that depending on how young or older students are, but that's definitely a way to do that. Or another thing too is, you can utilize that Google Meet code that is now available in Google Classroom, and you can have, you can post assigned times in Classroom and just have them jump on that whenever it's their turn to meet together. All right, any other thoughts or questions? All right. So next tip is with structure. Structure does not mean things have to be rigid. So that's one thing that really kind of stood out to me is I consider myself a very structured person. But when I think about when I was in the classroom, I was very rigid and probably let's just say authoritarian. That would probably be a good way to describe me. And so, but when it comes to, that's not how it would be now. When it comes to project-based learning though, we know projects tend to fall apart whenever they're too unstructured. So, typically, May, it's STAR testing time and all that. And, once STAR is over, that's generally the time when we see people who are willing to, hey, let's do a project because we just need to make it to the end of school. But think about how those go. Are those really successful? Like, do we really do anything with them once school ends? So I think what we have to do is we have to teach really good processes. And for you in your classroom, that's going to look different between you and maybe the next person. Whenever you consider your style and the way that you do class, but teaching them a process and then getting really good at that process. So, it's okay to structure a project the same way, where maybe you pose a question, kids, brainstorm ideas. So there are definitely different cycles and structures to help during PBL. John Spencer, who wrote this blog and who created these videos, he's known for the launch cycle, right? That's a really great process to follow in terms of project creation. But what I wanted to share with you are a couple of other things that he has to offer of processes. And so once he says in this video of project management that if we can teach them kind of these 4 basic skills, what that ends up doing is it really teaches kids how to be those self-directed learners. And if you were there in person with them, or even now, I think distance learning, I think our kids, a lot of them, not all of them, have learned. I mean, now my kindergartner can navigate Google Classroom and get to his assignments on his own, and he doesn't even need me anymore to do that. So I think we're seeing our students' skills grow, and they're able to kind of direct themselves. So imagine if they can get to the place where they're doing that, what that allows you to be able to do during that process. So that's going to let you meet more one-on-one with them, pull small groups, and all that business. So, and then the second structure that I really, really like is this 20-minute peer feedback. So in this video, he just describes that you have person A and person B. And what it does is this video walks you through person A is going to talk, person B is going to listen. Then what does person A do? Or then I think person B gets to ask a question. Then person A gets to respond. So it really goes through, okay, if students have created something, or if they are wanting feedback on an idea even, this is a great process to go through. So it's 10 minutes where person A is getting the feedback, and then basically the partners would switch. So then person B is the person getting the feedback, and then person A is listening. And so, I was thinking that I do my best work when I get real, authentic feedback from other people. It really helps when it's people that I've trust and I've built that relationship with. So that's an important piece. But anyway, what this process does is, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it brings new perspective to what I was doing. It helps me consider things that were that I had never even thought of. So one thing that I thought we might try, and again, this may be another crash and burn like the circle, but let's try this because I like having fun. If you click on the unequal sign, that will take you to a whiteboard, to Chrome Canvas. And then what I want you to do is I want you to just create a new drawing. It's going to make sure that you're signed into Chrome if you are. And you can share your screen while you're doing this if you'd like, so that we can see your drawings. But what I want you to do is I want you to give me your best Texas. Give me your best Texas. I'll give you about a minute. I'm not going to draw my Texas yet, but I want to see if you can give me your best Texas.
Tai, how do we get to the link that you were talking about
It's an
again?
unequal sign right here. You click that, then it's hyperlinked, and it takes you to, and if you just want the URL, it's canvas.apps.chrome. Your best Texas. Jessica, can't wait to see yours. I know, has had lots of experience doing this. And when you,
I may or may not be Googling what this.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yep. That happened.
When you think you have a Texas or you want to be our guinea pig, share your Texas. It can be the example or it can be the non-example. It's okay. This is a safe place. Okay.
That one's pretty good.
Yeah, who else wants to share their Texas? Let's see them. There we go. Nice, James. So, given the Texas, if I were to ask you, what kind of feedback would you want in order to make your creation better? What would you ask me? What would you ask? How would you want feedback? What do you think? James, what kind of feedback would you want on your Texas? Or how would you want to receive that?
I mean, I guess I would just say, like, what parts look lopsided.
Okay.
Like, ask for, like, specific sections that need to be improved, I guess.
Okay. Jessica, would you have the same question, different question?
I think I would have liked to not present it in front of the whole class.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, and I would have liked some one-on-one individual coaching for my my Texas.
Okay. How do other people like to receive feedback on the work that they do? What do you prefer? Raise a cat, or as what did you call this, Jena? Your talking pen?
The talking stick.
Talking stick. How else do you like? Yes, Matthew. How do you like to receive feedback?
Probably from a kid's perspective. Probably more so like the one-on-one, because you have a lot of kids that would probably be embarrassed. Some kids are really open, but some kids are really shy. And so they don't want their work critiqued in front of everybody else. They rather have that just kind of one-on-one thing.
Absolutely.
I think it also is going to depend on how much prep work I had before. Like right now, you just told me to draw Texas, and you know I'm not from here. So I have a very limited knowledge of what Texas looks like. And my geography skills are rough. But maybe if we had been studying Texas for a while and then I was asked to, I may have felt a little more confident to do that right away.
Constance, what were you going to say?
Also kind of like sandwiching with positives to say, so not just feedback. I know sometimes we think feedback just has to be like correcting the negatives, but also pointing out what they do really well and kind of sandwiching it. So like, oh, I really like how you did this. Maybe next time look at this. And so making sure to sandwich, but then also too, kind of how we talk about, you know, you would want to differentiate just like how they like their feedback as well. So like some of my kids, I know I can joke with them and they're not going to take it offensively. Whereas some of my other kids, if I were to say a joke, they might like clam up. And so also knowing your kids well enough to be able to say it in a way that they appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that it's going to take some setup time, maybe before the PBL or maybe in the beginning of the year or whatever, you know, in order to get to know your kids and understand that about them. Absolutely. So we're not going to ask all of our kids to draw Texas in front of the whole class whenever we start school is what I'm hearing, Jessica. Okay.
Well, I think too, it also depends on the activity. Like I myself, if we're doing it like in groups, I wouldn't mind showing it to my group or you right now. But like Jessica said, maybe like in front of the entire class, maybe I think it just depends on the activity that we're doing. We're all like doing it right now. So I had to think about a minute for Texas. There's the shape of Texas, but if we're all kind of in the same level, I'm like, I wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, Jessica made me think about the scaffolding too, because I mean, born and bred in Texas, I think that I'm like a 17th generation, not really, but in Texas. And so I know about Texas, but I think Jessica, you're from Nebraska. Somebody, is that right? No, Ohio. Wait, somewhere. Where are you from? I forget.
Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Colorado.
Okay, you're able to draw, I think it's a square, maybe.
Rectangle,
right?
yeah.
So, but if somebody asked me to draw a different state, I might not be able to do it either. So we got to make sure that we're scaffolding before, scaffolding within the PBL as well on whatever the knowledge is that we're wanting them to look at.
You know, Marcy, you bring up a good point that, you know what, for those kids who are more shy or who, you know, don't have that safe place like, you know, you might feel, distance learning actually might be a place where they thrive, kind of like Jessica said, that, you know, she knows that there are students who are doing very well with this and who are surprising us because, you know, they've been taken away from a situation like in class where they might have felt comfortable or they were nervous or they, you know, for whatever reason. So, but even for those kids, and I think just feedback in general, feedback doesn't have to come from each other. You know, what if you just said that, hey, feedback is going to be a part of this process. You just need to find another human being to get feedback from. So that could be a parent, that could be a sibling, that could be the Twitterverse if they're old enough, right? That could be, feedback can come from a lot of different places. So it could be from you, the teacher, but I think the valuable part is that they're just getting feedback and they're responding to it. And they are iterating on their creation, or they're at least thinking about that. And that's what these 4 things are saying is that feed process does. So for tip 4, just using structure, think about the steps that you're going to put in place during your PBL to make things happen, right? Some checkpoints, some milestones, some tasks they need to do. Kimberly had
yeah, 2 things that is really helpful in this process is going in as a class formulating a knows and needs to know. So you kind of set a nice basis for you're kind of guiding them, but they're actually coming up with what they do know about the question or project. And then you're coming up together with what else do you need to know, and you're guiding them through the list. And that really kind of sets the foundational knowledge too of what you have to do. And then for feedback, having checkpoints like say day 2, day 4, and you can have, if we're doing it digitally, you could have them comment, say 2 good things about what you see, and then maybe 1 thing that you're saying, what if? And then you get 2 positive feedback for 1, what if you, and then did that, and they can all comment. And sometimes that buffers that feedback too, and it gives you a platform. And then you can also revisit your knows and needs to knows list and move things that you learned to your knows. And all of a sudden they see the things that they're learning through the process. and it helps build their confidence. And then that way you're tackling each objective or teak as you're going through, you're seeing it, they're moving it over to their mastery, which is their nose. And then you also have another way to give feedback and get checkpoints too. So it just kind of buffers it. It doesn't look like direct feedback, but it really is.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
One thing you made me think of is like day 2, day 3, kind of raise your hand or thumbs up if you're thinking like weeks at a time. Are you like doing one thing like, hey, this is week 1, week 2, a little bit. But you know, your day 2 might be different from somebody else's day 2, right? Whenever they touch that or the next time that they look at it. And I think that's okay, right? Because if you've built in that structure and those processes, we don't have to have everybody on day 2, right? On Tuesday or on whatever that means. So I like the flexibility of that. And like with what Kimberly said, whenever you're keeping track of that masters and where they're at and what they know, then I think that helps me feel more confident in the process. All right. So feel free whenever we're done, go watch those videos. I think they are pretty good. So we're going to move it on to tip 5.
Okay. So tip 5, and I know you guys are already doing this. This was probably one of your very first thoughts when we went to distance learning to begin with, was the equity, because we need to really keep that equity at the forefront. We need to make sure that, we, as a district, we've started passing out Chromebooks and we've started passing out hotspots, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to have equal access and or even space. And we need to keep those in mind. If you're an only child and you got a Chromebook, then you're the only one that needs it. But if you're a family of 4 or 5 kids, then all 4 or 5 kids are using that same Chromebook and that same hotspot to do their work. So we just need to keep those things in mind, and we need to be patient. So how do we make sure that we're keeping equity at the forefront and making sure that we're still keeping in touch with our kiddos and getting them what they need? So some of the examples that I've got here is coming up with assignments that pair digital with non-traditional, right? So if you are doing a PBL and you've got where you maybe had to give instructions online, but now they're going to do most of it offline, then you're freeing up that computer time and that space and giving them a little bit more time to work on that. In his article, he also did talk about, just like when I say space, I'm talking like physical space. So I'm fortunate in my house that I'm in here in my office because my house has an office. But my husband's also an educator, so sometimes he's also in the office. So then we've got 2 people sharing one space, and we need to think about that with our kiddos. Like what physical space do they have to be able to work with them? Also, there's a link right here on the expectations and technology tutorials. I think it was Kimberly that was talking about how our kiddos are so much more have a depth of knowledge of technology, but sometimes they don't have that depth of knowledge of instructional technology. So it's really good practice for us to make videos to show them how to use the technology or what the expectations are for that technology. And that way we're giving everybody a fair, even playing ground, because, I would say my children probably, Ty's children, they may have a little bit of an advantage because they're living with instructional technology coaches. And so like my 7th grade daughter, she knows how to access Google Classroom. She knows how to do all the stuff in G Suite. And I don't get a whole lot of questions from her with that, but I have her friends coming to me. So getting those tutorials out for the kids and get them all on a level playing ground would help. Also offering academic tutorials to help with that scaffolding of whatever they're learning about, because we aren't there with them. They are kind of in charge of their own education, even if we are giving them the information. And then, you guys are already doing this, sending emails or doing one-to-one chats with students who might be struggling. So when we're thinking about questions to consider, some questions that we need to consider is what kind of access do they have to the internet? Do they have laptops or do they have tablets, or are they working from their cell phone? Are you planning projects that include limited materials? James, I believe it was, you were talking about Play-Doh, and do they have access to that Play-Doh? And I liked how you said, you know, see if you can find access to the Play-Doh, or even maybe if they have stuff around the house that they could make the Play-Doh, because there's homemade Play-Doh, right? You can make homemade Play-Doh out of flour and some other stuff. I can't remember. I try to forget because then I have to make it for my kids. You know, so what can we do about that? So my question to you guys is, how are you providing flexibility to your tasks and grading for your students? What does that look like in your classroom? You can use your talking stick.
Well, as a parent, I know my son has to turn in assignments, and he has an art teacher, Paul Strength at Kimbrough. He has been very awesome. He gives them like they had to do a color wheel, and then he's like, not everybody's gonna have color, so give me a color wheel made out of anything. And the kids were able to submit that. My son chose fruits and snacks around the house, and we set it on the floor. But other students did it like with the toy, like siblings' toys, and it was just really interesting to see the different ways that the kids did their color wheel with things that they found in the house.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, here's the thing: if we weren't doing distance learning, do we think it would have gone that way? I'm not sure that it would have. I think we would have had markers or map colors or pencil, you know, to do it. So it really got their creative juices flowing. What's up, Matt?
I had to unmute. Sorry. I think that's what you said was good, in the fact that I think the more you get to know your kids and where they're coming from and their home situations, because everybody's home situation is totally different, then you can kind of tailor what you're going to do based on kind of what you know, just based on what you know as far as their home life is and what have you. Because like you were saying, Jenna, there's stuff you can go around the house and make Play-Doh with. Well, kids may not have that. They may not have the flour. They may not have whatever the case may be. Yeah. So as long as you're tapping into your kids, and that's really what I like. Me and I'm sorry, a few other teachers were talking about this, that actually doing the Google Meets has been kind of a blessing in some ways, because I've got kids in my Google Meets who would never say anything in class. And I'm getting to learn more about them on a virtual than I do with them being in class, because they're the type that don't want to talk around other kids, or they're shy or whatever. So I'm getting to learn more about them. And by doing that, I can kind of, whenever they show their face and stuff, you can kind of scan around their house. You can kind of see what's happening. That's other ways to tap into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to share how you're showing flexibility with your tasks or with grading?
I like James when he was talking about the Play-Doh. He said, next week we'll be doing this, and it gives them, it's not, hey, tomorrow you need Play-Doh, and then we're, going around. It's, hey, next time you go to the store over the next week, look for some Play-Doh, and we give that flexibility and time, of.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
All right, let's go on to tip 6 then. So Kimberly hit on this a little bit just a second ago when she was talking about the knows and needs to knows and checking in, but we always need to make sure that we're doing frequent check-ins with our kiddos to make sure that they're understanding, that they're on track, that we're really looking for, making sure that they're staying with the goal in mind. So, and it's not just with our kiddos, we can do, he talks about doing frequent check-ins with parents and with other teachers, to see what's kind of going on there. I know when we very first started with our distance learning, teachers were just in like, I got to do something mode, and they weren't really doing a whole lot of talking with other teachers. And so we have these kids that have these enormous, they feel like they can't get it done projects because teachers, we were giving them something, and it ends up that we're most of the time giving them too much. So when we're checking in with other teachers, seeing what they're doing in their classes, and trying to level out how much work we're giving them, that also helps in distance learning. But it also helps, in real life too, especially in our secondary grade levels. and especially if you're teaching honors classes. I know when I was a teacher in the high school, I would have my AP kids come in, and they just were drained, and they said, we have AP projects going on in 4 of our AP classes that are just, it's killing us. So, just checking in with teachers also helps to make sure that we're not overwhelming our kiddos. Some ways that we can check in, daily meet hours. Also, I've had teachers talking about how they are having a hard time getting kids coming to their meets. And when I started kind of investigating, like, what's the difference? Because I'm hearing some teachers go, oh, I've got tons of kids coming in, and then I've got nobody's coming in. I'm thinking, okay, well, let me see what they're doing differently. And what I found really is that when you start if you start a meet with a fun activity or end it with a fun activity that has nothing to do with academics, it really gets the kids coming in, because then they're getting that social interaction that they're craving anyways, that gets most kids to school to begin with, right? So starting a meet, your office hours or your meet hours with a fun activity, and it could be educational, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, you're really going to, I think you'll start seeing an uptick on kids coming in. So some questions that we need to consider as far as doing frequent check-ins. Why is it important to check in with your students, parents, and other teachers? And then what ideas do you have, or what does that look like for you in a meet? What are you guys doing in your meets to get kids there?
I heard from a teacher from one of my campuses that heard about what Mark was doing at West, Emilee, about Amazon wish lists. And so they do random prizes to kids who show up to meets. And I thought, if you had people who were contributing, or even if you had, all those people who created some of those lists in the year, like when school started or whatnot, like that would be a great thing to consider, so that it doesn't have to be every one. You can keep students guessing so that they have an idea. But I thought that was an interesting way of somewhat bribery, but I think okay in this setting in May.
Yeah, and then our principals also started doing it. So they asked for the teachers to basically send the kids names that are doing everything on time and things like that. So they go into a drawing at the end of the week, and they get a $20 limit, which sounds crazy, but like there's a lot you can. Like they have a pre-approved list of like $20 things, but it's like one student out of the whole school that's doing what they're supposed to be doing and whatever that gets drawn. But they've had like huge reactions to it, so pretty neat.
I know at McDonald there's several teachers that are starting their meets out with Scriblio and having the kids do Scriblio, and I've not laughed so hard in a long time as listening to the McDonald PE teachers talking about what's being drawn on the screen. It was.
Can you put that link in the chat, Jenna?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, James, for joining us.
Okay. So let's go on to tip number 7 then. Final tip of the day. Start small. We started talking about it at the beginning, that when we think of PBL, project-based or problem-based learning, we're thinking this huge thing, but we don't actually have to do that. We can start pretty small, and it's okay to start small. In fact, I would encourage you to start small and then just build from there. We've got to remember that we're not teaching like we did before, right? And we've got to, and even when we go back into school and we're face to face, it's good to start small. It's more manageable, and you can get your feet underneath you, and then start making it larger. And so some of the examples that he gave us were just having students create blogs, or there's the Divergent Thinker Challenge, and all of these are linked, and so you can actually go into them and look at them. We've got a maker challenge or a Wonder Day project. And I would encourage you guys to go in and just click on those links and look at the videos that are on those links to kind of get more of an idea. Does anybody want to talk?
Can I give a +1 to the Divergent Thinker Challenge?
Oh, absolutely.
Man, I love these. And the structure and lesson plan that they give when creating those, it's very thorough, but there's even like an intro video that shows you like what you're going to do, and there's a time frame and whatnot. So all you have to do, and this is again like a process you can use over and over, but basically all you do is like you set what the materials are going to be. So maybe it's a sheet of paper, a pencil, and a paper clip. And so then you have them go through a process where they create something, and then again they have feedback, and then they have different parts of that. But that's another really great process that I found really successful. And that even, I've done that with kindergartners, and they were great at it. So I know that that would work for all age groups of kids.
And, you know, maybe that could be, it has nothing to do with your TEK or whatever, but maybe that's what you're starting your Google Meet out with every day, is like 5 minutes of just thinking about that Divergent Thinker Challenge even. So, okay, so you guys talk to me about how your instruction's changed with distance learning, and then how are you finding ways to teach foundational TEKs but make them fun to learn? What are some of the things that you guys are doing with that? No fun learning going on?
So one of my teachers, I kind of talked about it, I don't know, at another session. Anyways, she pulled her kids because she's done quite a bit of small PBL projects, but she wanted to, like, she teaches senior English. She knew at this point, like, her kids are dropping off. It's May and they're seniors. And so she pulled them and asked them what their favorite PBL that they did was. And theirs was their crime scene podcast, or true crime podcast. It was their research unit. And so she's having them pick another cold case, and over the next month, like, researching it and coming up with a true crime podcast. But they also have to turn in like their timeline. So they're building timelines based on like what happened and like their evidence board. And anyways, it's a lot, but the kids told her that they loved it. And so she wanted to keep pushing them. So, and to the kids that she knew didn't enjoy it, she gave them another choice to redo the same project. So they're used to the project. They're not learning something new. They're just having to apply it to a different topic, basically.
Absolutely. It's great when they have things that they like. And then it's also great when you add that relevance into whatever you're trying to teach them as well. It really helps bring out some of the more fun topics that you can really talk about.
I like coming back to something too, maybe something they weren't as successful with, or something that was tough that they did in the year, and being able to come back to that now that they have maybe a better understanding of it, or are in a place where they're ready to do that.
Like that new iteration and the time, because really when they were doing it, yes, they were expected to work out of class, but they only had like an hour and a half, 2 or 3 times a week, depending on if it was a week or a B week, to really dive into it and work on it. So yeah, they seem to enjoy it.
All right. Well, so when we're looking at the next slide, Dr. Vreeland in the last ILT told all of the principals, hey, this is the time where your teacher should be really exploring and looking at things in a different light and trying out new things. So when we keep that in mind, that comes from Dr. B himself, we really need to start thinking about some of the ways that we can explore, and also after we're exploring, how can we provide feedback to our kiddos? Because, oftentimes I think we get in such a rush that we think that feedback is actually just a grade, and it's not a grade. And grades are important in ways, but not important when it comes to the actual learning, right? So how can we provide feedback that will help our students? My daughter, the other day, she received a failing grade on math. So we went in there to try to figure out what she had done wrong, and there was nothing. We had no feedback. So I don't know how to help her with that. We had to contact the teacher and say, okay, she failed, but what did she get wrong? What is she doing wrong? So some of the ways that examples that I give for feedback, you can give a form. You can use Flipgrid. You can use Padlet or face-to-face, maybe whiteboard or hand signals. You know, we were using some hand signals earlier. You know, are we good? Whatever. Maybe using a comment box in the classroom as you're walking out. And so if you guys will look over there on the right-hand side, you see that Padlet link. That's a live Padlet. And what we want you guys to do is go there and 3 things. We want to know what are your ideas, your project ideas that you think you might want to start working on. What are your next steps that you think you need to do? And then also we want you guys to provide feedback for us. How do you think we did? Please leave any feedback that you'd like. What was great about this presentation that we gave to you guys, and what are some things that you think we should change for the next time to make it better? All of this is anonymous, so you don't have to worry about that. But we would really appreciate your honest feedback.
And one thing that, you know, I thought of with Dr. V, when he says it's the time to start exploring, it's really a time where the risk is low, right? What risks do we have right now if we try things that crash and burn? So it's low risk, but possibly high reward. And come August, you know, I would hope that he would still send the same message that we can explore, you know, in August and throughout the year. And I know that he does want teachers to take risks, and if and when they do fail, just to reflect, right, on that process. And so we really hope that between now and the end of the year, right, 4 weeks, I guess, that you get inspired to, you know, create a PBL idea, unit, lesson with your students. And any one of us on here, Emilee, Jena, myself, or any other instructional technology coach would love to be a sounding board for you to collaborate with, to work on that with you, to give you feedback. And so if that's something that you're interested, please hit us up and let us know. And then let us celebrate you, because we want to share things that go well and share your ideas. So we really appreciate you guys speaking up and trying weird things on a Google Meet that you probably haven't been asked to do. So thank you for that.
And Tai, on that the very last slide, when they get a chance, if they want to watch it, I know Emilee kind of talked about just the being creative. And not giving, you know, giving structure, but not step-by-step ideas. And so this video it was an Apple commercial, but well, I don't know why it's not working. Hold on 1 second. It was an Apple commercial, but it really hits home, I think, as we really start talking about PBLs. Give me just a second, I'm fixing it. It's okay, you should be able to watch it now.
Okay, so I'll refresh. We'll watch that. If y'all have any questions or anything, drop that in the chat. And thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Settle, please. Eyes up here. Eyes up here. We're not done. Group 3. Let's have Ivy and Michael, Ryan, Sally, and Thomas. Thomas, your homework is to explore gravity. Okay. Don't forget, projects are due on Friday. Friday, please. Friday, and don't forget your homework.
Homework. Oh, homework. I hate you. You stink. I wish I could wash you away in the sink.
Guys ready? Yeah.
If only a hippo would smash you to bits. Homework. Oh, homework. You're giving me fits. I'd rather take baths with a man-eating shark, or wrestle a lion alone in the dark, eat spinach and liver, pet 10 porcupines, then tackle the homework my teacher assigns.
Action.
see why you even exist. If you just disappeared, it would tickle me pink.
Next up, Group 3.
Homework. Oh, homework. I hate you. You stink.
Man, I love that. That might be one of my new favorite videos. That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
right, just when we give kids the space and the freedom to, come up with things, they will surprise us. So, great find on that video. Thank you, Emilee.
Mm-hmm. Nope, Jena.
Yeah,
Jena.
No words.
Either one of you.
Jena. Oh. I'm trying to point to Jena on. Oh, there we go. Backwards.
Thank you guys for joining us. If y'all have any questions, please make sure you ask. Let us know. We're
Y'all
here to help.
have a great weekend, guys.
Thank y'all.